Trump has been toppled, and the strangest presidency in American history is almost over. Hi, everyone. I'm Jeff. Welcome to Plain English, your top resource for learning English with current events. And what an event we have today. The American election was officially called just about a week ago. JR, our producer, has posted this full lesson online at plainenglish.com/312. On today's lesson, it was a wild ride, but the 2020 American presidential campaign has finally been decided, and Democrat Joe Biden has unseated Donald Trump. I'll take you step by step through the big news of election week in America, and we'll revisit some of these topics in future weeks. The expression on today's program is tread carefully. Listen for that and see if you can guess its meaning. Here we go. Joseph Robinette Biden Jr., a former senator and vice president, and a fixture of American politics for almost 5 decades, won the 2020 presidential election and will be the nation's 46th president in January next year, 32 years after he first ran for the White House. His victory cuts short the bizarre and precedent-breaking presidency of Donald Trump, a former reality television star who shocked the world with an upset victory in 2016. Biden, who will soon turn 78, will be the oldest person ever to assume the presidency and only the second Catholic to hold the post. Trump is the first sitting president to lose re-election this century. Kamala Harris, the daughter of Indian and Jamaican immigrants and Biden's running mate, will become the highest-ranking female politician in American history and will be first in line of presidential succession. Prior to this campaign, she had been a U.S. Senator from California, Attorney General of the state of California, and a prosecutor in San Francisco. She will be the vice president. Biden's victory caps a roller coaster campaign that took place amid a global pandemic, protests in the streets, the death of a Supreme Court justice, and finally, the illness of the sitting president who came down with the very disease whose severity he had been downplaying for months. After being hospitalized for COVID-19 in early October, Trump came roaring back onto the campaign trail, hosting raucous rallies and fighting until the end. It was almost enough. For most of election night itself, it appeared the ghost of 2016 might once again haunt the Democrats, as it became clear that Donald Trump was outperforming expectations. He won 2 big states early in the night, Ohio and Florida, the latter chock full of Hispanic voters and the elderly, both of which were expected to deliver for Biden. As the vote count continued on election night, it was not clear who would be president, but there were 2 big losers. the polling industry, which had confidently predicted a Biden landslide, and the news media, which had once again failed to capture the strength of Trump's support in its pre-election reporting. What was supposed to be an early and decisive win for Biden turned into a nail-biter. Television news and websites display the results as they come in. Individual counties send batches of results to a media consortium throughout the night and, if necessary, the following days. Media outlets tally the votes and track candidates' victories by state, which is how the official vote is decided. Most Americans went to bed on Tuesday night thinking Donald Trump somehow had a chance to pull off another monumental upset, as he was shown to be leading in just enough critical states to win again. But a quirk of 2020 is that more Americans than ever before voted by mail, and many mail-in votes were not counted on election night itself. Because Trump spent months disparaging mail-in votes, most of his voters were counted early, while many Biden voters were counted later. Trump's apparent lead evaporated in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, three large states that were expected to decide the election. When Americans woke up on Wednesday, it was Biden who appeared to be leading by a vanishingly thin margin in just enough states to win. His advantage continued to expand through the rest of the week as more mail-in votes were tabulated. By the Saturday after Election Day, enough votes had been counted in enough states to decisively say that Biden would win the election. Finally, the 74 million Americans who voted for Biden, not to mention a multiple of that number in other countries, could exhale. Donald Trump, who had governed so erratically, often by tweet, broken so many norms, undermined so many institutions, and offended so many people, had finally been toppled. The rest of the world looked with mouths agape at America when it selected the oft-bankrupt casino mogul turned reality television star as its leader in 2016. After 4 tumultuous years, the global community could now look forward to a return to normality. The mayor of Paris, speaking for much of the rest of the world, tweeted, "Welcome back, America," minutes after Biden's victory was announced. American Democrats, however, cannot afford to celebrate for long. For while their man did win the presidency with 50.5% of the vote, the result was not the stinging rebuke of Trump they had been hoping for. Biden won more votes than any other presidential candidate in history, surpassing the previous record holder, Barack Obama, by some 4 million votes. But the second highest vote total in American history went to Donald Trump right here in 2020. Despite his loss, he won 7 million more votes this year than he won in 2016, signaling that the divisions in our country run deep. A further difficulty for Democrats was down ballot, where they underperformed expectations. Democrats had been expected to take command of both houses of our legislature, giving Biden a mandate for sweeping change. Instead, voters cut the Democrats' majority in the House of Representatives by at least 5 seats, and vulnerable Republicans held on to their Senate seats in South Carolina, North Carolina, Iowa, and Maine. Final control of the Senate will be determined by 2 special elections in January, but it appears that Biden will have to contend with a legislature at least partially controlled by the other party. Voters put a scare even into many Democrats who were re-elected. Biden himself has always governed as a middle-of-the-road Democrat, but the restless left wing of his party often championed ideas that were well outside the mainstream of public opinion. Many Democratic lawmakers in moderate suburban districts expressed frustration that they were frequently tied to their party's most radical ideas. One furious Democratic lawmaker who almost lost re-election said she didn't want to hear the left-wing slogan, "Defund the police," ever again because it almost cost her her seat. Biden will therefore have to negotiate competing priorities. The base of the Democratic supporters is hungry to see its progressive agenda passed. Moderate Democrats, with an eye on this year's close call, will want to tread more carefully, and for any law to pass, it will need at least partial support from the opposition party in the Senate. Biden may be the perfect person to negotiate these different priorities. He is a classic Washington deal-making politician. He was the chief negotiator with Congress during the Obama presidency, and he has decades of experience working with members of Congress. The leader of the Republicans in the Senate, Mitch McConnell, was the only senator to attend the funeral of Biden's son. So the two have a good personal and professional relationship. One media outlet said that Washington's new power couple would be Mitch and Joe. But if this pair of septuagenarians is Washington's new power couple, one will have decidedly more power than the other. And for all the Democrats' complaints that they didn't win as many legislative seats as they wanted, they did win the biggest prize. The American presidency may be checked in important ways, but it is still a powerful office. Much of the machinery of government sits in the executive branch, and Biden will have a free hand to make important domestic changes and reset America's course abroad. At his age, he will almost definitely be a single-term president. This may give him the freedom to be bolder in his reforms and seek more unconventional compromises than other first-term presidents have been. I have always known that American presidential elections are big news abroad, but I must say I was a little surprised by exactly how big this news was in other countries. I've purposely tried not to spend too much time on American politics, but it is big news. So over the next few weeks, we'll do one lesson a week on the election and its implications for the future. We'll save the other lesson for lighter topics. Today's expression is to tread carefully. To tread carefully means to be very careful in what you do and say so that you don't make a big mistake. We usually say this when there's a danger of being too bold or of not being very careful. We say this when the stakes are high and there's a possibility of making a big mistake. In today's lesson about the American election, I said that the Democrats have two competing priorities inside their own party. The more left-wing base of younger voters in big cities will want to see fast movement on progressive policies. But many representatives in moderate districts will want to tread carefully. They know their voters aren't keen on some of the more progressive policies. They want to tread carefully. They don't want to charge into 2021 with a big, bold agenda that is too far outside the mainstream. If they do, as a party, then they risk losing seats in more moderate districts in the next election. They want to tread carefully. They want to act carefully because of the risk of making a mistake. I mentioned in a previous lesson that I think Facebook, Twitter, and other social media platforms have to tread carefully when considering what content to pull down. There's a lot of inflammatory and untrue content out there, but the platforms don't want to put themselves in the position of being the arbiters of truth in every discussion. That would not end well. Therefore, they need to tread carefully and take down only the most inflammatory posts. Some of you are individual investors. You buy individual stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. If you're considering investing in a fast-growing, young, popular company, you should tread carefully. I'm not saying those are all bad ideas, but you should be careful before getting swept up in the hype of a young and innovative company. Many companies that see their values rise dramatically in the early days are not able to sustain that high valuation. Investors who tread carefully when Uber and Lyft went public were rewarded for their caution, as both those companies are worth less than when their shares were first floated on the stock market. Lyft is worth much less. Before WeWork could go public, investors were treading carefully. They didn't think WeWork was worth nearly as much as the company said it was worth, and those investors proved to be right. It's a good thing enough people tread carefully with WeWork. I'm not saying popular new companies are never a good investment. They often are. But it is important to tread carefully and not get swept up in all the excitement when making personal investments. It's important to tread carefully in interpersonal matters. If there's a conflict in your family, you don't want to offend anyone too deeply. You have to live with these people for a long time. Better to tread carefully. Choose your words carefully. Try to resolve the conflict without hurting anyone's feelings and without making anyone too hurt. You can still make your voice heard, but choose your words carefully. Tread carefully. You don't want to say something you'll regret later. Today's quote of the week is a good summary of the presidential race. It's by the journalist Michael Grunwald, and it's all about the differences between Trump and Biden. Before I read you the quote, I'll tell you two things. Number one, a die-hard fan is a fan that's very enthusiastic. And an incumbent is a person who currently holds an office. So, here's the quote. Biden had no army of die-hard fans and no talent for monopolizing the nation's attention. But he had a secret weapon, the unpopularity of the incumbent. Indeed, Biden's campaign was about presenting the former vice president as the polar opposite of the sitting president, and it worked. And that brings us to the end of our lesson today. Thanks for sticking with us until the end, and congratulations if you followed it all. I purposely wrote this one to be a little more difficult than normal. So take your time studying the transcript at plainenglish.com/312 if you need to. I know many of you have been following the news in your own countries, so I hope you learned a bit about the election and learned a bit of English too. And we'll explore a few more topics related to the election outcome in the coming weeks. But first, on Thursday, the future of car buying. Startups around the world are trying to revolutionize one of the most miserable consumer experiences. We'll talk about what they want to change in the next lesson. See you then.